Ignaz Semmelwiez is known as the father of hand washing. He discovered the wonders of the now basic hygienic practice as a way to stop the spread of infection in 1847 during an experiment in a Vienna hospital's maternity ward. He has been described as a martyr in life and a hero much later. His advice was finally put to good use only after he died. Semmelweis informed generations beyond his own that handwashing is one of the most effective ways to prevent the spread of diseases. In Vienna, Semmelweis was known as savior of mothers. Ignaz Semmelweis was born on July 1st, 1818 in the Taban neighborhood of Buda, Hungary, today part of Budapest. He was the fifth child out of 10 of the prosperous grocer family of Joseph Semmelweis and Therese Buller. Ignaz Semmelweis began studying law at the University of Vienna in the autumn of 1837, but by the following year, for reasons that are no longer known, he had switched to medicine. He was awarded his Doctor of Medicine in 1844. Later, after failing to obtain an appointment in a clinic for internal medicine, Semmelweis decided to specialize in obstetrics. He started working at Vienna General Hospital's maternity clinic in 1846 after graduating from medical school. Before long, he became deeply unsettled by the extraordinarily high maternal mortality rate in one of the wards. In the ward that was staffed by physicians and medical students, 13 to 18% of new mothers were dying of a mysterious illness known as the childbed fever. By comparison, in the ward staffed by midwives, about 2% of women died of the fever. No one knew what explained the extreme discrepancy. So Semmelweis started digging. He scrutinized everything from the climate to the crowds at each maternity clinic, trying to pinpoint factors that might cause a spike in fever cases at one. But the only obvious difference was the midwives. What were the doctors doing to the women that midwives were not? Everything was in question, everything was doubtful, he wrote in his book on childbed fever. Only the large number of deaths was an unquestionable reality. Finally, he made a startling realization. When a fellow doctor died of what happened to be a case of childhood fever after cutting himself with a scalpel that had been used during an autopsy of one of the women. The physicians, Semmelweis realized, had been dissecting infected cadavers with their bare hands. Then, with those some contaminated hands, they were delivering babies. They were inoculating their patients with bacteria. They were basically immersed in pus for hours. The science of bacteria was not yet understood, but Semmelweis was getting close to his answer. He believed the autopsy physicians must be carrying around invisible particles of decaying animal organic matter on their fingers. So he required anyone examining a woman in the labor room to wash their hands in a chlorinated lime solution before entering, especially those who had just touched dead bodies. Within months, the results of this simple hygienic change were apparent and astounding. The maternal mortality rate dropped to 1 to 2%, matching that of the women in the midwife's ward. Could the simple act of washing hands really be responsible for saving all those lives? To some of Semmelweis' colleagues in the medical community, it sounded crazy, it sounded radical to some because of the prevailing ideas about how diseases spread. Back then, people believed in the miasma theory, that wafting toxic odors were largely responsible for spreading diseases through the air. If people cared about washing their hands in earlier decades, it was because they were trying to get rid of the smell, not the particles. Now, Semmelweis was claiming that those invisible particles on doctors' hands were to blame. Nobody was pleased to think the doctors were responsible for killing all these women. Nobody liked that, especially because the ward with the midwives had a lower mortality rate, but of course the doctors were supposed to know much more than them. Semmelweis had a messaging problem. He could not seem to communicate why hand washing solved the problem. He did not speak German well, so he largely shied away from speaking about his findings at medical conferences or writing about them in medical journals. He left spreading the hand washing gospel to his colleagues at the hospital, who saw its benefits firsthand, but his superiors despised and ridiculed him, writing off his research altogether as they clung to the miasma theory, and in 1849 he was let go. By 1865, after suffering a mental breakdown, Semmelweis was admitted to an asylum. He died of sepsis shortly thereafter at the age of 47, after a wound on his hand became infected. Theories of what happened to the doctor towards the end of his life have varied, ranging from beliefs that the rejection he experienced within medical circles may have contributed to his mental decline, or that he suffered from early onset dementia. Today, as we stand on the verge of defeating the corona pandemic, let us take a moment to thank Ignaz Semmelwiez, the father of hand hygiene.